Hey everybody, it is the 10th of July 2019 and I'm Pilgrim. I got a sort of medium length drive to do today, so here's another episode of me just talking about all sorts of random shit in the gaming industry. Yeah, all sorts of crazy nonsense, and actually the first species of crazy nonsense I want to talk about is G2A, the key reseller, who basically will buy your stolen keys and then resell them. And if you are so inclined, you can buy a stolen key from them and then roll the fucking D20, check your to hit score. I don't even know, that's a fucking bad metaphor, whatever. You just roll the fucking die and see if the key's going to work or not, of course, because if it's stolen, sometimes it doesn't work, sometimes it's already activated, and of course there's no support. It's a super scammy business. Anyone who says they're not scammy, I don't know, they're deluded. Anyway, recently they've been getting a lot of negative press because lots of developers have gone out and said, look, if you're going to buy keys from G2A, which have presumably then been stolen, they said, just fucking don't, because we don't get any money off it. We get nothing. They said, in that case, just pirate the game. We'd rather you do that than keep this business afloat. I can't remember, it was a few indie devs and there was one bigger one as well that was saying this. But the funny thing is that, you know, in the shitstorm that's followed this, because now everyone's talking about what a trash company G2A obviously is, they've been desperately trying to get some positive PR. So what happened was, just the other day, I think it was yesterday or maybe the day before, there was these like bunch of journalists got this email from G2A saying, oh yo, we've been getting a lot of negative press coverage, so we've prepared a ready written objective neutral look at why G2A's business model is perfectly acceptable, and we're looking for it to be published on your website, but it's important that we're not credited in any way for its authorship. Like, how is that ethical on any planet? Anyway, so of course, you know, it said the guy they sent it to, I can't remember his name now, but the dude said, like, he did what any normal person would do. He just fucking posted their email to fucking like Twitter, and everyone can see what fucking fucking load of bullshit they are. Anyway, the funny thing is, their defense, G2A said, oh, it was one of our employees that went rogue. One of our employees went rogue and composed this big article about why G2A are okay, and then they sent it to 10 journalists on their own initiative, and we're going to handle this matter and discipline that employee. It's like the scent of bullshit is so strong, you can smell it through Twitter. I mean, who believes that? Anyway, that was item one. Fucking G2A being ridiculous and trying to bribe journalists to write nice things. They weren't even trying to bribe journalists to write nice things about them. They were trying to bribe journalists to publish the nice things they had written about themselves. Oh my god. Anyway, that cracked me up. I have to run into the shop and do a whole lot of stuff like shopping, but as soon as I'm back, I'm gonna hit record again because I got some more stuff I want to talk about. Okay, I'm back from the shop and I'm on my way again. Now, the second thing I wanted to talk about is something that I think is very interesting, and that is about the intersection of politics and gaming, or in fact, you know, if they do intersect at all, and how much they should intersect with each other. God, I said intersect so many times, it sounds weird now. Intersect. Anyway, so yes, the reason that this has sort of popped up now, more than, you know, it being just a regularly interesting subject, is that there are two articles recently published in PC Gamer. One by Leanord Boyarsky of Obsidian, who's currently making The Outer Worlds, which is that sort of Fallout-esque RPG, and one by Mike Pondsmith, the, I guess, creator of the Cyberpunk franchise and universe. And they were each asked in their sort of own, well, in broadly similar terms, the extent to which politics would feature in their games. And I think that their responses, although superficially similar, actually are subtly very different, and they're subtly very different in a very interesting way. So if we start with Leonard Boyarsky, he was asked about politics in his game, and he said that the game would feature politics, but that at no point was the intention that the game should be experienced as a lecture. He said he didn't want players to feel like they were being lectured about politics, but that the game would contain political themes. And I guess his idea is that you can make different choices depending on different political ideologies, and you're meant to see the consequences of those choices in the game, and that's the extent to which it's political. Now, Mike Pondsmith was asked a broadly similar question about politics in his game. He was asked if he thought that Cyberpunk was something political. And his response was, of course, Cyberpunk is political. He said, Cyberpunk is political like everything else. And I think that, so there are lots of layers here to peel away at. And I think the first one is the sort of translation from PR speak to, I don't know, true meaning. what it is that these two people are really trying to convey, but in the language of sort of PR. And they're differently thick, these layers of PR speak. Mike Pondsmith, I think, was much more direct in his responses by simply stating that, look, this game is about a dystopia in the future where corporations hold massive power, and, you know, there's rampant wealth inequality, so obviously it has political tones, you know? It's pretty straightforward. He didn't say anything like there's any political intended message, or, you know, he wasn't, I don't know if that's what he thinks, but he didn't say that there was any intended political sort of message he wanted to convey with this universe, just that it has political tones. Now, on the other hand, Boyarsky's response was that there's politics, but he didn't want it to feel like it was lecturing the player. Now, I call that PR speak of a much higher degree than Mike Pondsmith's response. And the reason I think that is because the only reason you would say you don't want players to feel lectured in the current context of the gaming industry is relative a certain demographic of gamer who complain about games and developers and publishers pandering, in air quotations. You can't see them, but I'm doing I'm doing a half air quotation because I'm driving. I don't want to kill myself, but they're pandering to what the fuck was I talking about? Oh yeah, they're pandering to the media, or to sort of special interests, or to the liberals, or whatever. They don't want any pandering in their games, is often written as. So the question is, what do they mean by pandering? And that's a good question. But I think that this is the I think this view that games shouldn't pander to politics or to society at large is the point towards which Boyarsky was sort of referencing when he responded that he didn't want the players to feel like they were being lectured. Now, the folks who complain about pandering in games, in my experience, which is quite long in the gaming industry, has only ever been used with regards to women or people of colour in games. That's the only times I've seen it used. For example, in the most recent Battlefield installment, Battlefield 5, when the news broke that there was going to be the option to play as female soldiers, there was an awful lot of sort of rabbling, a lot of hoo-ha from folks saying that this was pandering. This was a good example of the aforementioned pandering, that the developers were pandering to some sort of special interest, and that they had an agenda, and this was evident in them including to have playable female soldiers. Now, the other times I've seen this recently, I guess, there was a discussion around The Witcher 3, I think, that there were not very many people of colour, and in Kingdom Come Deliverance, and that the argument was made that the inclusion of people of colour in these settings would equate to pandering. Now, it's I don't know. See, if you could think of something else, and if you're listening, and I don't think anyone's fucking listening. I'm just screaming into the void. But if you are listening, and you can think of an example where the word pandering has been used with regards to politics or some sort of opinion in gaming, and it wasn't in reference to women or people of color, then you can write it in the comments, and I'll learn something today. But I think that's the only times I've ever heard the sort of the whole pandering argument made, and I think that this is the point, that this is the position that this guy's maneuvering towards, and that is to point out from the very start that, like, look, we're not a liberal, we don't have any liberal messages in our games. We're not trying to push any agenda, because when you say that gaming is pushing an agenda, it's all, the only people who make those complaints are from, I think, a pretty right-wing perspective demographic. They're the ones who complain about their games being having an agenda, and this is, you can relate this to the Gamergate sort of whole spiel, the controversy, whatever you want to call it, or anything else. And you could maybe argue that, well, the only reason that mostly right-wing folks get upset about games potentially having an agenda or being political or trying to push some sort of narrative is because it's mostly a left-wing medium. And you can make that argument fine. I wouldn't agree with it, but that's the argument you make, then okay, we can discuss it. But I still think that it's pretty much an empirical fact that the arguments you get that games shouldn't pander, they shouldn't contain politics, it comes from the sort of the right side of the political spectrum. Now, with all of this out of the way, where the fuck was I talking about? Oh yeah, I was talking about fucking The Outer Worlds, and him saying he didn't want the player to feel lectured. So I guess what this means is he's trying to signal to that demographic, like, look, I know that you're upset about what you well, he either means, look, I know you're upset because the left wing behaves like this and they have agenda-driven games, or he's saying, I know that you perceive the industry to be in this way, even though he himself personally doesn't agree with that. Who knows which one of those two positions he's in? Maybe he personally agrees, maybe he doesn't. In either case, he's signaling to that demographic to say, look, I'm aware of this issue, that you don't want to experience the game like this, to have some sort of agenda that is pushing, and for that reason, I'm signaling there's not going to be any lecturing. Now, if you contrast those two responses, Mike Pondsmith's and Boyarsky's, I think that the much more honest perspective, or rather, I don't know, honest is the wrong word, I guess, because I think they're both being honest. But I think the much more genuine response is from Mike Pondsmith, because he's saying that, look, politics infuses everything we do and it informs everything we create. And I personally feel, I'm not being Mike Pondsmith anymore, now I'm being Pilgrim, I personally feel that gaming isn't just, gaming is more than just what it used to be, like a fun sort of pastime. I think gaming has reached a point where it's integrated into the broader society and into our broader culture, that it actually carries meaning with it. I think that it's not just a form of entertainment. I think it's also an art form, and I think it's also, I think it's a vehicle. I don't even know what I'm fucking trying to say. Gaming isn't just like you sit down and blow up a load of aliens anymore. Gaming actually can say something. We've reached the point where the quality of the developers and the games they make, and the stories they tell, is such that you can compare it meaningfully to other mediums, whatever the fuck you compare it to, other things like fucking books or theatre or movies or fucking TV series. Gaming is on par with that in terms of its cultural significance. Of course, there still are like stupid games. No one's going to say, I'm trying to think of just a stupid game like I can't even, fucking brain freezing on this one. Just think of a stupid game you play that doesn't really have much other meaning than whatever you want to give it. Fuck, why can't I think of a single fucking one? Like Rocket League. There we go, boom, Rocket League. I spoke about it the other day. I don't think Rocket League can make some claim to being some sort of culturally significant thing. Rocket League is just about cars driving around knocking a ball. However, I think that if you look at the games that are sort of winning the big awards and making the most splash in the industry these days, I think they all hold some sort of, if not agenda sounds so pointed because it's sort of manufactured that way, but I think maybe they contain some sort of message or significance or meaning beyond them simply being a game. You know, if you look at like Red Dead Redemption, which is on the face of it about cowboys, you know, Indians fighting the law, that kind of shit. And then, but if you look deeper, it's about the conflict between the freedom and maybe the, I don't know, almost classically liberal values of old, and the new civilization coming and what it brings along with it, how you can combine the two, blah 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 blah. You know, there's a lot of depth to it. How can we preserve the sort of the freedoms of those first settlers heading out west with the encroaching civilization and the increasing level of technology? How can we combine all these things together? I think that's an interesting deeper meaning to the game, more than just, you know, shooting loads of cowboys or whatever. What the fuck am I talking about? Anyway, all I mean is that all games have got some sort of deeper meaning to them. Well, not all games, but the big ones, the ones that are doing well. Like God of War, for example, has something. It's saying something in a sort of meta way, you know, because it is in itself a deeper game than the previous games in the franchise. So while perhaps the narrative itself is pretty straightforward, it's about, yeah, you know, if you're a father, you should really be there for your kid, blah blah blah. On a deeper level, I think it has a sort of meta significance that it's signaling that the industry at large can be bold enough to make stories that resonate on an emotional level and not just on a sort of gameplay level, on a mechanic level, that they can mean something and that's okay. That's what I think God of War meant to me in a meta sense, rather than just the narrative of the game in terms of its broader implications for the industry. Now, what the fuck am I trying to say? Basically, I think games mean more than just than nothing. And so I think when you look at these two responses of Boyarsky and Pondsmith in the Outer Worlds and and Cyberpunk, respectively, what Boyarsky is trying to say, or rather, I think what he implies, is that gaming can be political, but it can only be political in the sense of it containing political themes. It mustn't contain political messages. Or rather, he's electing in this instance for his game not to contain political messages. And Pondsmith, on the other hand, is being much more fearless, I think, in this sense, by saying, look, everything is political, including this game. And I think that difference in response is pretty interesting. And in terms of my excitement or my hype about these two games, it's made me feel extremely excited about Cyberpunk, because now I'm looking forward to a narrative which has meaning, something which is politically informed, and it isn't afraid of expressing some sort of viewpoint. You know, it's not afraid of telling a story from a particular perspective. What is the effect on, you know, group X of policy Y? You know, I think that, on the other hand, the Outer Worlds now, to me, sounds like it's going to be trivial. It sounds like, you know, yeah, we've got the story to tell, and if you do X, Y will happen, but if you do Z, fuck, I'm out of letters, except Swedish ones, but I can't use those. Or let you do Z, then A happens, you know? What the fuck was I talking about? Oh yeah, so if you do A, B happens, if you do C, D happens. But that's not really telling a story which is politically informed, or telling it from a certain perspective, or, you know, sharing some sort of view. That's just, I don't know, it's just showing how choices have consequences from your, I don't know, from the way you've designed it. It's not, I don't know, basically, it's like the difference between playing a game like Democracy, where, yes, it's political in that the theme of the game is political, and the actions you take have ramifications, and you can sort of learn a little bit about how politics works and how things fit together by playing it. You know, what your effects of different views when put into action might be. That's on the one hand, and on the other hand, a game which actually is political, like, for example, Tropico, which has a political message. I don't know if it's lost at some point along in the franchise's history, but it's a satirical fun poking at the sort of banana republics of the world. You know, that has a sort of political ideology infused in it. I mean, yes, of course you could argue it's problematic to sort of almost celebrate it in the way that it does, but at least it's a work of satire, you know, and satire is inherently political. Anyway, the point I'm trying to make is I think that Boyarsky from Obsidian, in saying that the game isn't going to lecture people, is, I think, overly cautious to a demographic which I think, which I of course recognise is present, but whose voice I feel is amplified by gaming media and indeed coverage of gaming in the broader media. I think that he's giving them too much space. He's pandering to them, if anything, by saying that this game isn't going to pander to any sort of agenda. And on the other hand, I feel like Mike Pondsmith is being quite bold and defending what I think is going to be a very interesting and very politically informed narrative. And that makes me very excited about that game. Anyway, that's what I was trying to say. Jesus Christ, it's difficult to just talk about this shit, you know? And, you know, you might think, oh, it's easy to just sit in your car and drive around talking bullshit. And, okay, it is easy to just sit in your car and drive around talking bullshit, but it's not very fucking coherent, is it? I can't remember what I said 3 minutes ago, let alone fucking 15. This is why I think maybe it's better to write this kind of shit down. But it's like having a conversation, but but obviously there's no. Anyway, I'm having a conversation with myself, and that's all right. That's normal, and I'm not crazy. What was I talking about? Oh yeah, all this shit with the politics. Anyway, that's my take. I think that it's cowardly to deliberately refrain from in any way allowing a political perspective or even your own viewpoint to affect your artistic expression when developing or designing a game. I think that that's something that developers should not be afraid of because it enriches them. Of course, if it's a stupid, you know, I'm not saying you should go out and make a game about being a Nazi because Nazis are evil. Oh fuck, I just broke that law. What was it called? The one when if you talk about Nazis, you lose. I don't know. That law anyway. But you know what I mean? It's like if you're talking about fucking Nazis, then that's like when you lose an argument or something. But who am I even arguing? I'm not even fucking arguing. I can talk about Nazis if I want to. It's my podcast. So the point I was trying to make about the Nazis was, oh yeah, I'm not saying, you know, anything goes. You should just make games about all sorts of retarded ideologies. That's not what I mean. What I mean is to say is you shouldn't fear allowing your narrative to resonate on a deeper level and to contain political messages, because that's what makes games good. That's what made Red Dead Redemption 1 and 2 into the masterpieces they are, in my view. And you know, my interpretation is that there are many more games that are political than you think. My reading of you don't read a game. My experience of Doom, for example, capital letters, the one that came out 2016, was it? Just a couple of years ago. They're like a reboot of the franchise. That game to me was very political in a sort of meta way. That game was I think that game in a meta way was a response to the just things I've just been saying. It was almost an argument to what I've just been saying. Or not really an argument, it was a compliment. So I'm just saying now, here's what I mean. Fuck, it's so hard to fucking talk, isn't it? Anyway, what I'm trying to say is, I'm saying now, yeah, games can be politically informed, and that makes them into good games. And of course I think that's true. That's why I fucking said it. Don't question it. But the point is, I think that the guys who made Doom made that game to point out, look, sometimes a game can just be a game. Sometimes a pipe is just a pipe. It's just a game. All you got to blow up aliens. That's fine. Go and blow up aliens. You don't need a deeper story. You don't need to, like, you know, rescue some sort of like child soldiers from anything. You know, it doesn't have to have this deeper. It doesn't have to have broader relevance to the current society. No, it can just be a game. But the irony, of course, is that in itself, I feel, is a political statement. Maybe a political statement or a philosophical statement. It's a statement about what is the relationship, or how should the relationship between gaming and society at large look like. And the response that's forwarded, I think, by games like Doom is just, well, sometimes a game can just be a game. It doesn't need to be anything else than just a game. And I think that that's also a very fair perspective. But the argument I'm trying to make extremely badly is that in itself is a political or philosophical viewpoint. It's saying that sometimes it is just a game. So that's like a meta thing. It's the same with God of War. You know, the narrative in God of War isn't super political, really. It's like, I'm not going to spoil the fucking story, am I? Anyway, it's about a father-son relationship. But The in the context of the gaming industry, you know, in the real world, its significance, I think, is to point to the fact that games can have a deeper meaning, and that's okay, and that developers of games shouldn't shy away from that. Anyway, I've fucking waffled on about this for fucking ages, but you know what I mean. So, long story short, I think it was a bit chicken shit of that guy Boyarsky to say that they're not going to lecture players. I can see why he's saying it, and of course no one likes being lectured, but at the same time it just sounds like it's going to be trivial, the game. It's like, yeah, it's going to have a story, but it's not going to be very impactful because we don't really want to offend anyone. And that sounds, I don't know, that turns me off a little bit. Cyberpunk, on the other hand, fucking sign me up. I can't wait to experience that, you know? I think it's going to be great, and I think it's going to be great because they're not afraid of allowing their creative decisions in terms of the game development to be informed by real-world politics, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, I've got to where I was going now, so I got to stop recording. But this was interesting to me. And again, I don't think anyone's fucking listening to this. I'm just screaming out into the eternal void. But fuck, it's cathartic to get all this shit out of my head. It's just been bouncing around in there. Man, it's nice to get it out. Anyway, that's all for me. The end. Oh shit, I gotta find the button to end it. Oh, there we are. The end.